You never imagine that the person who once held you tightly in bed, whispering, "I can't live without you," in the darkness, would someday look you in the eyes and tell you to disappear. Yet, that's exactly what happened to me. Her name was Lauren, and at one point, I genuinely believed she was my forever. We weren't perfect. Like any couple, we had our highs and lows, but there was always love, or so I thought. The truth is, sometimes love doesn't end in flames or screaming matches. Sometimes it fades in quiet, unnoticed moments when one person simply stops trying. The last days of our marriage didn't explode, they crumbled. It began with small changes. I'd come home from work exhausted, hoping for a hug, a smile, a simple, "How was your day?" But she'd barely glance up from her phone. Dinner used to be something we cooked together, filling the house with laughter, wine, and music. Lately, it was silence. She'd eat early without me or skip it entirely. When we did sit together, conversations were shallow, dry, as if we were coworkers forced to share a table. Still, I tried. I brought home her favorite pastries from the little cafe on 5th. I took her car in for servicing without being asked. I left sticky notes on her mirror with messages like, "You're beautiful and we'll be okay." She'd throw them away, no thank you, no smile, just empty eyes and cold indifference. At night, she started sleeping with her back to me, not just turned away, but distant, as if the idea of touching me irritated her. I'd reach out just to feel her skin, even for a second, and she'd flinch, pulling the blanket tighter. There was no affair, no dramatic betrayal, just an invisible wall she built, brick by brick, while I stood outside, watching her drift further away inside our own home. One evening, I brought it up gently. She was scrolling through her laptop on the couch. I sat beside her quietly and asked, "Hey, are we okay?" She didn't even look at me, just sighed and said, "I'm tired, Mark. I don't want to talk." "But we never talk," I replied. "You don't even look at me anymore." She closed the laptop, finally meeting my eyes, and that's when I realized she was already gone. "I feel suffocated," she said. "You're too emotional, always needing something. I just want space. Can you give me that?" "I'm not asking for much," I said. "I just don't want to feel like a stranger in my own marriage." That's when she stood up, walked to the kitchen, and muttered under her breath, "God, I wish you'd just disappear from my life." I froze. She didn't yell. She didn't throw anything. She said it calmly, with a cutting cruelty, like someone canceling a business arrangement. I sat there, hands numb, staring at the hallway where she'd vanished. The woman I'd loved for 7 years had just told me to my face to disappear, like I was a burden, like I was nothing. And the wildest part? I didn't say a word. I didn't argue. I didn't break down. I just stood up, walked to the bedroom, opened my closet, and started packing. There was no dramatic music, no rain pounding against the windows, just the quiet sound of drawers opening and hangers sliding off the rod. A man collecting pieces of himself from a life he thought would last. I packed enough to fit into 2 duffel bags. I left the rest, not out of kindness, but because I didn't want anything that reminded me of what we'd become. I grabbed my wallet, phone, and keys and walked out the front door at 1:14 a.m. She never came after me. No message, no call, no voice behind me saying, "Wait." She had told me to disappear. And for the first time in months, I listened. I drove for hours, no destination, just the road. I stopped at a rest station at dawn, slept in the car for 2 hours, then headed to my brother's place 2 states away. I told him I needed a few days. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a spare key and let me crash on the couch. The next week, I wandered unfamiliar streets like a ghost, drinking cheap coffee, staring at the sky, wondering how someone could go from kissing you goodnight to treating you like dead weight. Lauren didn't contact me, not once, and that told me everything. She hadn't expected me to actually leave. She probably assumed I'd sleep on a friend's couch, then come back days later, tail between my legs, begging to fix things. But I didn't. I didn't come back. I didn't text her. I didn't even check her social media. I vanished not to hurt her, not for revenge, but because when someone tells you with absolute clarity to disappear from their life, you owe it to yourself to take them at their word. I rented a room in a shared apartment in a quiet part of town. Started freelancing, took small gigs, slowly rebuilt my life from scratch. I changed my number, cut ties with mutual friends, moved in silence, no drama, no explanations. I became a man with no past, and that's what saved me. Meanwhile, whispers reached me through old friends. Lauren told people I had abandoned her, that I'd walked out without warning. She painted me as the quitter, the one who gave up. Let her. I wasn't interested in defending myself. I'd spent too long explaining myself to someone who no longer cared to listen. What mattered wasn't what she said. What mattered was this: I gave her everything I had. And when she told me to leave, I did. That silence? That was the beginning of my peace. Disappearing wasn't the hard part. Staying gone, that took something deeper. After I walked out of Lauren's life, I didn't just change cities. I changed everything. I moved to Austin. Told no one. Rented a small studio above a mechanic shop, paper-thin walls, a fridge that barely kept milk cold. It wasn't glamorous, not even close. But it was mine. It was quiet. And most importantly, it was far from the version of me who used to beg for scraps of affection. The first few months were rough. I won't lie. I worked random jobs, deliveries, freelance web gigs, manual labor, anything to stay afloat. I ate cheap, wore the same 3 shirts, slept on a mattress on the floor. But despite all that, I wasn't miserable. For the first time in years, I had peace. No cold shoulders, no emotional landmines, no walking on eggshells. The silence in that studio didn't hurt, it healed. One morning, I looked in a cracked bathroom mirror and didn't recognize myself. My face was tired, scruffy, pale, a man who'd been surviving, not living. That was the turning point. So I made a promise. I wouldn't just disappear. I'd evolve. I joined a cheap gym. Nothing fancy, just weights, sweat, and discipline. I went every day, especially when I didn't feel like it. I started running early in the morning when the streets were empty and the world wasn't awake to judge me yet. The more I moved my body, the more my mind began to move too. I started reading again, psychology, discipline, business, self-worth. I listened to podcasts during late-night shifts. I cut out alcohol, bought a proper bed, invested in therapy, not because I was broken, but because I refused to carry unhealed wounds into my next chapter. Within a year, I'd built a modest life. I landed a stable remote job in UX design. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. I furnished my apartment, bought a used car, got decent clothes. Started walking with my head a little higher. People noticed. Strangers smiled at me. Women glanced twice. But I wasn't chasing anyone, not yet. My focus was razor sharp, becoming the kind of man who doesn't beg for love, but commands respect, not through arrogance, but through presence, through peace. All this time, I never reached out to Lauren. No texts, no calls, no lurking on social media. She told me to disappear, and I'd honored her wish. What she didn't realize was that the man she told to vanish wasn't sulking somewhere. He was rising. Mutual acquaintances tried to pull me back into old social circles, birthdays, group chats. Hey, I ran into Lauren the other day. I declined every time. I didn't care about updates. I wasn't waiting for her to change. She'd made her choice. And in her mind, I'm sure she pictured me as a lost cause, the quiet man who left in shame, maybe hiding behind a bottle. But the truth? I was sharpening every day. By the end of the second year, I'd started a side hustle, a small brand helping local businesses with branding and web presence. Word spread. Referrals grew. I reinvested every dollar. By the third year, I was turning a consistent profit. No debt, no noise, just progress. Physically, I'd changed too. Down 30 pounds, leaner, stronger. Clearer skin. Better posture. I didn't walk with my head down anymore. I didn't wait to be invited. I created space wherever I went. Emotionally, I was steady. No outbursts, no desperation, just quiet control. One night, I sat in my new apartment, a 2-bedroom in a clean, modern building with big windows and a skyline view. Sipping tea, no TV, just the hum of the city. And I realized it had been 5 years. 5 full years since I'd last looked at Lauren. 5 years since she'd told me, without hesitation, to disappear. She probably assumed I'd come back eventually, that I'd knock on her door, ask for another chance, say, "I still love you." Maybe she even told herself a story where she was the victim, where I'd abandoned her without explanation. Let her. The man I'd become didn't need to rewrite the past. He just needed to outgrow it. I didn't hate her. In fact, I silently thanked her because that rejection, that cold dismissal, forced me to rebuild, to become someone better than I'd ever imagined. And then it happened. The collision of past and present. A Friday night. A friend's wedding, small, intimate. They'd asked me to help with the design setup. I almost declined, but something told me to go. The reception was in a rustic event hall on the edge of town, string lights, live music, and outdoor garden. And then, as I stepped inside, adjusting my cufflinks, I saw her. Lauren, standing by the open bar. Same eyes, same posture, but older. Not in a bad way, just softened, like someone who'd weathered a few storms herself. She hadn't seen me yet. I froze. 5 years. Then she turned. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I swear I watched her body stiffen. Her drink tilted slightly. Her lips parted. She didn't walk away. She didn't turn. She sat as if the sight of me had pulled the ground from under her. That's where this chapter ends. The man she'd told to disappear stood in front of her, tall, composed, and no longer hers, which he never saw coming. The man she pushed away wasn't gone. He'd just become someone she could no longer reach. 5 years is a long time. Long enough to heal. Long enough to evolve. Long enough for a man to stop looking over his shoulder. And long enough for a woman to assume the past would never catch up. But the past has a way of appearing when we least expect it. And that day, it walked into the room, wearing a navy suit, polished shoes, and a confidence she'd never seen in me before.